Where'd my joy go?
All right, well, today I am speaking on joy. And if you have the program, you see this great dog who really practically by himself inspired this message. Today my message is, where did my joy go? And joy, the best way I can define joy is it's an inner smile that's the result of trust. Joy. And as followers of Christ, we know we should have it. In 1 Thessalonians 5:16, it tells us that we should be joyful always, which is a tall order, but nonetheless, it's what we're told. Also in Romans 12:12, we're encouraged to be joyful in hope. And even in trials, James 1:2 tells us to consider it pure joy. So there's something very strong about joy, and we know from Nehemiah 8:10 that the joy of the Lord is our strength. That is where we find our strength. But we know that joy doesn't just show up, nor does it so easily reside in us all the time. We have to defend it. And a great way I thought about it is this little cup. And this styrofoam cup can hold a lot of water. It can hold things that continue to make me happy if I drink them. Like if I went out and filled this with coffee, I'd be really happy. But there's things that come along, and it's really easy to pop a hole in a styrofoam cup. You know, it doesn't take much. And the hard thing is all it takes is a few little holes, and you have a problem, because now you have a leak. And this cup that used to make me really happy, now that happiness has just leaked out. And it's like this styrofoam cup. They don't work together, the fork and the cup, and it's a matter of time before it'll leak out. And I truly believe this. I don't think joy just always sticks around, and why I believe that is Paul even asked the church in Galatia. In Galatians, he asked this very question, where did your joy go? He was saying, what happened? What fork got to your cup? How did that thing get popped and your joy leaked out? So I believe it is something that can very, very well happen to any of us. I don't think any of us are exempt from spiritual troubles, especially losing our joy. It's something we have to defend. And I'm not going to take time today to convince you of the importance of joy or the power of joy, because I think that we understand that. I think that when we taste it, we know the power of it. I'm also not going to make a list, like a little formula of 10 ways you can keep joy. You know, and you just pin it to your mirror and every morning check off your 10 list, because life doesn't work like that. But instead what I thought is I just started praying, saying, God, what is something that really is like that fork that pops holes in our cup regarding joy? And I came up with a word as I prayed and studied, and that's what we're going to look at today. And I think we could probably have several messages on how to defend joy and what forks could pop a hole in our cup. But the word today is bitterness. We're going to look at being bitter. Being bitter is when something isn't how we want, so we grow frustrated and unforgiving towards someone. And this is a real joy thief, because it's like that fork in the cup, but it doesn't just pop a little hole. Bitterness pops a hole and then stays and just twists like that till there's a big gaping hole. And it's hard to keep joy in our life when we hold on to bitterness. So I'm going to look at some scriptures and look at some illustrations of bitterness right from the Bible. So if you'd open up to Hebrews 12, we'll read together. I'm going to read verses 14 and 15 in Hebrews 12 today. Hebrews 12, 14, and 15 says, make every effort to live in peace with all men and be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. So we see this great illustration, this bitter root. So what I want you to imagine this morning is I want you to imagine the seed of a weed. Because everybody, you know that weeds have seed, right? They spread and they grow and continue to grow. So imagine the seed of a weed kind of wafting on the air into your garden. and finding a place to take root. And as it grows, it gains more power, perhaps spreading its own seed. And now you have a problem. You didn't have a problem when the weed seed was just going by. When you had a problem was when it found a place to take root and to grow and develop its own root system. What Hebrews 12 calls a bitter root. Now, bitter roots do the same thing. It starts out as the seed of a weed. And I thought about, here's a couple of the seeds. Okay, these are a couple of the seeds that become weeds and grow bitter roots in us. The first would be expectations, is one I thought about. And the second is unresolved conflict. And those aren't the only two. Those are just two I want to focus on right now. Because left unchecked, they can bring bitterness. Like so. I have some examples of each one. Let's talk expectations for a minute. Let's go to work. So everybody in your mind, go to work. Tomorrow, show up at your job. You show up and you're thinking, you know what? I have worked really hard. And I deserve a raise. I've worked really hard. But you know what? I'm not going to talk about asking for a raise because they should know how much I do around here. And I could simply, file a request and show them, how important I am to the company and ask for a raise. But they should know by now because I have put in time and day after day. In fact, I kind of resent even working here because they don't know. And you see how the seed is finding root. And now that I mention it, they don't even appreciate me. And what's happening is I'm getting bitter. I'm developing a thought process in my head that is heading towards bitterness. Now, if we step back from that moment, could it be true that you work hard? Yes. Could it also be true that you're not appreciated by somebody? Perhaps. Be true that people don't notice what you do? Sure. All those things are true. But that's why it's the seed of a weed. It's something that's still floating by. And when you grab it and plant it in the soil of your heart, then it starts growing a bitter root. When you say, you know what, I deserve better. They don't even appreciate what I do. You know what, my boss doesn't even know what's going on in here. And pretty soon you start to feel like Dilbert in the comic strip, which is a fun comic strip, but it's a bad place to go as far as getting a bitter root. Here's my illustration for unresolved conflict would be, I've had this problem with somebody, but I'm not willing to try to deal with it. And this makes doing some things in life difficult, but I'm going to move on. It comes up in my mind sometimes, that person, but by not dealing with it, I push that person away. And maybe you've done this. I know I've done this one. I've been right there where I didn't want to work something out. The conflict was too much. But what happens is whenever I see that person, what happens in your mind? When you see that person that something's unresolved and you haven't worked it out, maybe in your mind you're thinking of ways that they could get hurt. Maybe you're doing the little, I don't know if you've ever done this, but stand back and put somebody at length, and if you go like this, like I'm punching your head right now, and you can actually do this. You can flick people's heads. And maybe like in your mind when you see somebody, you're like, I'm just flicking your head. Or this was my favorite. And there's all kinds of little things that in our mind we entertain about somebody. Why do we do these things? Unresolved conflict, we haven't dealt with it, and we're becoming bitter towards somebody. Now again, if you step back from the moment, could that person have hurt us? You bet. And most likely it did hurt, and it was a real hurt, and it was a careless hurt. But what I'm talking about is, will we grab that seed and plant it into our garden and let our bitter root grow? We don't want to get to the place where when we think of somebody, it causes a bitter feeling to stir up in us. But man, I've been there time and time again. Think about somebody or I see somebody and this bitter feeling rises up and I realize, I haven't dealt with something and there's this yucky thing in me. And it right away kills your joy. It kills your joy. So you see how big this problem is. Pretty soon we're slaves to bitterness. And with all these holes in the cup, it gets pretty drafty. And we start getting pretty cold. So I want to look at fighting bitterness because I'm somebody who, I'd rather deal honestly with it and trying to change. As much as Jesus can do in me, I want him to do. So I just had a couple thoughts on fighting bitterness. The first, and again, this isn't rocket science, but you know what? Following Jesus often is not rocket science. It's simple. That's why Jesus often described it as a simple way. He didn't describe it as the easy way, but the simple way. And there's a difference. Easy means anyone can do it. Simple means anyone can understand how to do it. That's why a child can follow Jesus. But it doesn't mean it's always easy. It means there's big choices we have to make. And this first choice is to let stuff go. To let stuff go. See, if we want joy, where does joy come from? Where our strength is found in the joy of what? The mall.